The spring game weekend is here, and Nebraska is going to play real football. What to expect next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and that part of me is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on the classic board game Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store and Google Play. And thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Mitch, here we go. It's your official spring game primer here on the Locked On Nebraska podcast, as we have this thing that we've been waiting for a little while coming tomorrow with the I don't know if toe will meet leather at all. It sounds like they won't do a whole lot of real special teams.
I don't know. We'll see. I kind of got a mixed bag from Matt Rhule on that answer Friday. Maybe some kickoffs. They're not going to go with the USFL kickoffs that they did last year. So for whatever reason, but special teams is always a question at the spring games as far as how much you get into it. We will, Connor, have better weather than we do Friday in eastern Nebraska. So be on the lookout. Today, Friday, it's not a great start, and it's supposed to be some bad stuff later today.
Yeah, rockier ending even. So let's talk about the shine of tomorrow. So Rhule talked yesterday for the final time leading into the game, and kind of took us through a little bit of the format, which is still, like you said, a little bit murky here and there, but definitely hit some bullet points on what he wanted to see and what fans should expect to see tomorrow. What'd you take from that, Mitch?
Yeah, well, they're going to play football. That's the big thing. That was the takeaway last year from Matt Rhule. He was going to make this a football game and not make a mockery out of anything. They're not going to go out there and play, field goal contest or, offense versus defense. You'll have the number one offense on one team leading that group. You'll have the number one defense on another team. So there should be some good 1-versus-1 stuff early in the scrimmage, at least for the players who are playing. You won't have guys like Nash Hutmaker and Ty Robinson on the D line. You won't have Ben Scott and Bryce Benhart on the O line. They may get in for one play, which I'm not sure about the value there, but he said everybody would get at least one play. So that includes Tommy Hill. Quarterbacks will get plenty of plays, but they'll be in green jerseys and they won't be hit or taken to the ground. So the sacks are going to look kind of sad.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be football.
Yeah, and that does. I mean, we've brought it up a couple times over the last month or so. Spring practices going on, and then now spring games over the last few weeks. Like it's not football everywhere. It's not. It definitely wasn't much football.
Sometimes it's not even a practice.
Yeah, sometimes it's not even a practice.
You
so
just say, let's just be done.
Yeah. Sometimes you invite Joey Chestnut to eat a bunch of hot dogs on the sideline. And so I think that really fits with, first of all, it fits with Rhule like completely. It's like, yeah, we want to do football. Second of all, I think it fits with Nebraska, and people have been going to the spring game for years. We look at it as a sort of mark in the calendar and things like that. Personally, I don't like hold it near and dear to my heart or anything, but it's nice, and people can take that stuff and what they see from players as fodder as they go into the summer. Hey, I like this, like this here and there. And
there's a player who's going to stand out. You're gonna have a player who stands out, and he's going to be the new fan favorite for a bunch of people who
definitely
the spring game provides their first football viewing opportunity.
It kind of makes people feel like an insider. You're just like, here's what we have so far. It's not like this is not us playing a game. This is not us really, trying that hard. But here's our group, and here's what we have to show you so far. So it's kind of a nice window into the program. Still 4 months before the season starts.
Rhule said again that he watched Georgia's spring game to get a sense of what Georgia does. You continue to get the idea, the feeling that Matt Rhule just looks at Georgia's program. That's like the That's the dream for him and Nebraska. And I think Nebraska fans would be okay with that if their program eventually looks like what Georgia's does today.
Yeah. He also, I mean, he talked about the passing game a little bit too. He said he wants to see how they throw it, how they catch it, and how they're able to how quarterbacks are able to make their reads in that regard. And then you pair that along with, not necessarily full tackling all the time and full pass rushes and stuff like that. I think what it probably lends itself to, and then he talked about how he wanted to see, a shootout, the Husker shootout, and stuff like that as well. So I think that what that probably lends itself to is maybe the ball in the air a little bit, not representative of what Nebraska is going to be on offense, but I think he wants to get a good look at the quarterbacks, and he definitely likes to see them in live game situations. We'll have a clip later that he'll explain that a little bit more, but close to live game situations in front of people as they could possibly simulate.
Yeah, the red and white shootout, he would change the name to that if Nebraska allowed him to. I think Nebraska would allow him to. He may be underestimating his own the weight that he pulls. He could change it to the red white shootout. You'll also see a motivated defense, I would imagine, because last Saturday it was the red white shootout and the offense put up a dozen touchdowns or just about that many. So the defense was not happy. We heard from Ty Robinson on Thursday. He said that was not the standard of the defense, and he's going to help make sure, even if he's just yelling at people from the sideline, that the defense plays better. And he said he's seen a 180-degree turn in those two practices this week and their attention to detail since that Saturday scrimmage. But the defense may have something of a motivational edge going into this thing.
One thing that popped up in the spring game last year and it ended up being a little bit of a look into the season was the ball was on the turf a lot. I think, gosh, I want to say I looked it up yesterday. The ball was on the ground eight times.
8
Is that right?
6 lost. Yeah, and 2 picks.
And we were like, well, it's the spring game, and so that's something that's that bit them last year with 31 turnovers, and now they come back this year and they've been emphasizing it in spring ball. So I think it's safe to say, like, if they drop the ball on the ground 8 times again, we could actually take that very seriously this year. That will be something that has been emphasized this entire time and shouldn't happen tomorrow.
Yeah, last year it was all about the new coach and the transition under Matt Rhule and what was his message going to be to the team and how is it going to look in front of the fans. And this year, no. People are still excited about Matt Rhule and excited about Dylan Raiola. Although don't get too excited about Dylan Raiola. Matt Rhule wants to make sure of that, and we'll discuss that in the next segment. He wants people excited about every player. But if there's bad football and ugly football, then that's not going to sit well, not just in the stands with the 60,000 people there and everybody watching at home. It won't sit well with Matt Rhule, and you can see Marcus Satterfield is focused on turnovers by the answer that he gave and that we showed on the pod on YouTube here earlier this week. So turnovers are not a good thing for Nebraska. They're not Nebraska's friend at all on Saturday, unless you're playing on the defensive side. And even then, you'd like to see your offense take care of the ball.
Well, and then another big one, that was one of Nebraska's things that they didn't get right a lot last year was situational stuff, whether it's, no huddle, 2 minutes, getting guys in the right field at the right time, delay of games and stuff like that. Nebraska needed to be a little bit crisper in that category last year. And I think that's something that they've emphasized, just kind of making that next jump, taking a step up. And so if that's another thing that they struggle with tomorrow, I think we could actually look at that and say, wow, I mean, something's got to pick up in that category. At the same time, you give a little bit of grace because you're dealing with a couple freshman quarterbacks and first time in the stadium and the whole deal. But I think that's something that they'll emphasize again in the spring game.
I'll be interested to see how that looks. And Rhule made it sound like the wide receiver group is a little beat up. We already knew about Isaiah Garcia Castaneda. He's coming back from ACL surgery and hasn't been a full participant in spring this year. Malachi Coleman had shoulder surgery after the season. He's not been a full participant. But there may be some other receivers, perhaps some of the older guys like Jamal Banks, who's just held out for the same reason that veterans are. Although I would really like the opportunity to see, I would, and it's about me. So I would, I think the fans would like the opportunity to see Jamal Banks. You may have to wait until August 30th for a deep, big look at what Nebraska's wide receiver transfer from Wake Forest, and maybe even the guy from Texas, Isaiah Nair, although he hasn't played as much football, especially over the last 2 years, as Banks. So I would think that he'll be in there. But please subscribe to us on all of the podcast listening platforms. Continue to watch us on YouTube if that's what you're doing today. Follow us on Twitter at LockedOnNEB. Email us at lockedonneb@gmail.com. After the break, we're going to get specifically into what you can expect from the quarterbacks Saturday at Memorial Stadium.
Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, like superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. So whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. Keep your ride or die alive in ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
All right, quarterbacks will be on display Saturday in the spring game. And Matt Rhule was asked Thursday about the fans who might be coming mainly to see Dylan Raiola. I thought it was a fair question. He's the five-star prospect. People are talking about Dylan Raiola. We're talking about Dylan Raiola. Let's be real, five-star quarterbacks, they sell tickets. But Rhule, he didn't really want to go there on the subject of Dylan being the main draw at the spring game. Let's listen to what the head coach had to say.
I'm sure they're excited to see Dylan play, but most of them, they come to the warm-ups here because they want to see all the players. So we don't love any one player more than anyone else. So I hope Husker fans have a pretty high standard. I'm sure that if I was a Husker fan, I'd just be coming hoping that the ball's not on the ground. You know what I mean? Like, hey, let's play real football. So, but I mean, you want to be the starting quarterback at Nebraska? You better be ready to deal with the heat. You know what I'm saying? So.
Okay, so Go ahead. I have a thought, but start us.
That makes a lot of sense to me. That's kind of the way that they've, positioned this thing all spring long. I do think, there is an element to how I think they're kind of aware what the general temperature of the fan base is, and like I said, they've done a pretty good job of tamping that down a little bit. So maybe people aren't showing up to the game exclusively to see Dylan Raiola, but they were on the edge of going, and they were like, yeah, well, I gotta see this guy up close, during the spring. But I do think maybe he doesn't have the full scope of like how important the fans maybe think he is so far. I wonder about that piece of it as well. But yeah, I mean, they've tried to keep that thing kind of tamped down a little bit, and that's going to continue, I think, tomorrow.
Yeah, hey, at the end of the day, it's not Rhule's job to worry about what the fans think about his players. It's his job to get them ready to play. But he is sensitive to the fact that too much emphasis on one quarterback can end up being a problem. And Nebraska probably put too much emphasis on one quarterback a year ago at this time, and it ended up it being something that cost them. Not really anything that the Huskers could have done differently. Heinrich Harburg, Chubba Purdy, they had some opportunities in the spring game a year ago, and I think Jeff Sims, he won the job. Jeff Sims looked pretty good in the spring game last year. I looked it up, and he was 9 of 14. He hit a couple of nice passes on the drive that he primarily led early in the scrimmage. One to Billy Kemp. So it looked okay. And then the second half of the Minnesota game, or the end of the first half, and then the whole second half of the Minnesota game arrived, and it didn't so much look okay. So, I think Rhule is cautious in that sense of not putting all of his eggs in one basket and making sure the fans don't do the same. But then he kind of transitioned at the end of that answer into something else that was maybe more interesting to me. It was like, hey, if you're going to be the starting quarterback at Nebraska, and he said there's a 66% chance that a freshman will be the starting quarterback. That's everything else being equal. There's 2 freshmen and 1 non-freshman who are in contention for this thing. It's not really 66%, but just statistically in terms of the roster, it is. And he said, you better be ready to take the heat if you're going to be a quarterback in this system, a freshman quarterback in this system. And he talked about how the quarterback and the head coach are the 2 people who go out and face the music after every single game. It's not Isaac Gifford, the star leader in the secondary. It's not Bryce Benhart, the right tackle who has started 41 games. It's the quarterback, and if that's a freshman, well, there's no time like right now to go get yourself ready.
Yeah, you'll often hear the coach talk about the spring, and this is more of a spring game, I guess, part of it for me. But like, you'll often hear the coach talk about the spring game and how it's just another practice. But I mean, that question was asked to Rhule, and it was from the perspective of, hey, like, is there a difference evaluating from what you see in practice, and is there between that and evaluating when there's actual people in the stands? And he's like, hell yeah, there is. Like we want to see those live bullets, that's as close to a live bullet as we can simulate, we could possibly get. So we want to see where people are, how they react to things. Does the crowd being there help them? Does it hurt them? Does it put them in a different place, or does it, make them act like it's just another practice and they can expect consistency in that regard? So I thought that was really important and definitely a good perspective to have on it. Like this is another practice, but maybe there's some bonus points that go on top of it. If not necessarily you produce or you perform well in a spring game, but there are people in the stands and that counts for something. And then as far as the quarterback at Nebraska, you made a point before, Mitch. Like, I think that was really important. Nebraska having this history kind of putting their eggs in the basket of one quarterback, and I think they want to shy away from that a little bit, which is definitely a good thing. So I think there's a lot of different things that went into that specific answer and the reaction that he had. And they kind of all came out there.
Or if they do put all their eggs in one basket, which is inevitable when you have a starting quarterback or a prospective star as the quarterback. If they do put all their eggs in one basket, Rhule wants to make sure that happens as late in the process as is possible to still make it efficient for this program. Like in this case, that's going to be toward the end of August when he names a starting quarterback. And then there's nothing you can do because people are going to jump on board and it's going to be, here we go with all the hype. If it's Dylan or Heinrich or, Danny Kalen, it's going to be all hype, more so with Dylan because that's the expectation. But any of those guys, if they're given the job, then okay, let's go. Let's see what this guy can do. And that's a lot of pressure as he laid out for one player.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So there's some importance to it. I don't know if it's like the end of the world. It's not the biggest thing of all time, but I think he wants to simulate that pressure as much as he possibly can. And so saying that helps simulate the pressure a little bit. Okay, Here it is. This means something. So let's see how people react.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, after the break, we're going to talk more about that pressure and what Rhule expects from players, not just at the quarterback spot, but from everybody on the team to be able to handle in front of a crowd of 60,000 people.
Hey, if you are watching Fox Sports or ESPN, sorry, Mitch, or on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume because they're yelling at you too much, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channel. Is that part of the Locked On Podcast Network? That's your team every day.
All right, Connor, we've all been there as a player or fan. It's halftime. The scoreboard's not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure your team can pull out a win. That's when you have to dig deep, lift up your head, and say to yourself, it's time to get back into the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as possible. That's right. I'm talking about our show sponsor, Monopoly Go. It's the Monopoly you love, but it's on your phone anytime with new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to others. Play countless dynamic boards, bankrupt your friends by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, charge rent for your iconic properties. So get back out there, put your game face on, and download Monopoly Go, free on the App Store and Google Play.
All right, back here for the third and final segment on a Friday, the final segment pre-spring game here on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Everything changes after this, by the way. It's also a big recruiting weekend for Nebraska, and they get a couple nice commitments heading into the weekend. An athlete out of Colorado, Tanner Church, who you could see on either side of the ball at this point, and then a tight end from Utah by the name of Bear Tenney, and he had a quote in one of his commitment stories that was out there, and he talked specifically about the excitement of playing with Dylan Raiola.
Yeah.
So that was kind of notable there.
Yeah, they connected when Bear, who won't play with the polar bear, sadly, when Bear came into Lincoln for a visit this spring, he really connected with Dylan Raiola. So it does seem, Connor, that Dylan Raiola is a draw for Nebraska. But that's 7 commitments for Nebraska in this class of 2025. And they've got big things on the horizon this weekend, targets in town. We talked about Michael Terry, the 5-star athlete out of San Antonio, in the show on Thursday. If you want more on that, go back and check that out.
Let's hit one more clip here, Mitch, before we get out of here. And we're wondering sort of what to expect, the biggest 1 or 2 things that we could take from Saturday. And so oftentimes we talk about the difference between practice and games and how you want to simulate, you both, I guess, want the practice to look like the game and the game to look like the practice. You want them to be kind of one thing together. Yeah. Rhule had a comment on that Thursday before the spring game on Saturday. Here he is.
Yeah, bear with me. I'm going to make sure, hopefully hit the right button here.
The Tuesday, Wednesday Huskers last year were better than the Saturday Huskers. The Saturday Huskers last year, like doubt, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of what are they going to say about me, like all of that stuff affects performance for young people. And so Tuesday, Wednesday, you get beat. The next play, you're like, all right, whatever, and you play the next play. You get beat on Saturdays, all of a sudden you go to the sidelines. How we handled that wasn't elite. And so that's my job, and that's our staff's job. That's also our players' job. So I'm very much excited to see us play in front of a crowd.
Yeah. So that's kind of important stuff. I mean, the mental stuff cropped up pretty quick last year, and I don't know if it ever went away. They had some crippling mistakes at the end of games, and obviously, I think it got a little bit better. Maybe not to end the year, but kind of as the year went on, Nebraska showed some ability to close and finish and some resiliency and stuff like that. The fact of the matter is, Mitch, like when you look at the fall, they're going to be in another bunch of close games. They're going to be in a whole bunch of close games. And so the mental thing really has to be tied up. And I think he wants to see a little chunk of that during the spring game.
First time I've heard him talk a lot about the mentality that Nebraska needs to have and toughness at the end of games. It's why he wants to run a bunch of 2-minute drill, hurry up offense in the spring game on Saturday. It's the first time I've heard him use that analogy about the Tuesday, Wednesday Huskers in 2023 being better than the Saturday Huskers. And that's got to be hard to hear. If I put myself in the shoes of a guy in that locker room and your head coach comes out and says that, and if he's saying it to the media, he's saying that to the players. That's one thing about Matt Rhule. He can be harsh at times, either individually toward a player who's not living up to what Rhule's expectations are, and he can be harsh toward the entire team, which you see a little bit of it in that clip we just played. But he's always going to make sure that those guys hear it first, straight from him, and not through a podcast or
yes,
an article that's written. So he's talked to them about that. Yeah.
He's direct. Like, this is our problem. I have identified it, and now we're going to, like, when I tell you what we're doing in practice, we are working on specifically this part. This will help you with this. That's huge. That's such a big deal.
There's also a big measure of accountability there. He says that's the players' jobs, but he also says that's my job to fix that. And then kind of a nervous laugh, like, hope I get that fixed here pretty quick. And
I think
it's the staff's job too.
For sure. Last year, my sense was that the mental piece ended up being a bigger mountain to climb than they thought that it was going to be. I think they had been told that, but you don't really know until you play football games. And he saw it. Like, it was just a different reaction during football games last year for Nebraska. So another year or another half a year, I suppose, of kind of working through that and figuring out which buttons need to be pushed. And hopefully you can get a little bit closer to your ultimate goal. But that was a hurdle that they maybe never climbed last year. And one of the final steps, or one of the steps, I guess, in order to get Nebraska back to a fully operational, successful football program.
Yeah. I don't know what more we can say about that. Be mentally tough. It's tough. It's hard in sports, no matter what sport you're playing. You can't teach someone to be confident. They've got to figure it out on their own. You can put them in positions to succeed, and that's what good coaches do. That's what they're there for. And that's why you work. That's why you work in an off season. That's why you have 15 spring practices. That's why you take advantage of every moment in an opportunity like they're going to get Saturday to go out there and play in front of a big crowd. Now, it's not going to look full. Maybe this rain moves out of here and some people walk up and buy 5,000 more tickets and they get 65,000 or something along those lines in the stadium. I heard somebody during the media availability on Thursday say that they'll have 90,000 there, and they're not going to have 90,000 there on Saturday. But still, it's going to stack up well, and it's going to be a lot more than the 100 or 200 that they've had at their first couple of spring scrimmages this year. So it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for them to face down some pressure and feel like they're in a football game, and then to be able to react like they're in a football game. He wants the crowd to be loud. I don't know if that's realistic, but he wants them to be loud. So the offense has to use their helmet to helmet, their helmet to headset system. And we'll see how much the Husker Nation can deliver on that.
Also, Mitch, before we go here, both Heinrich and Dylan had 90+ yard drives at that practice. Yes. So we apologize. Well,
I don't know. I think I may have said something like I'd heard it both ways. That I had heard reports that both did, and that actually turned out to be right. Okay, whatever. He didn't want to say on Saturday.
I thought that was awesome and really truly funny. Great comedies. Like, this is definitely a forgotten about issue, but here I am. It's the last thing I'm going to say before the spring game. Boom. And then he hammered the table on his way out. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. Well, we'll see who leads a 99-yard drive on Saturday, and there will be no confusion because everyone will be there to see it, and it'll be on television. So, if someone does, or if they don't, we will discuss that Monday on the Locked On Nebraska podcast, along with everything else that we see and hear and decipher at Nebraska's spring game. And then it'll be 3 or 4 months of darkness before everything ramps up again. I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about. So that's it for now in our breakdown of the Nebraska spring game. Please continue to listen to us. Check us out on Monday with all of our reaction. In the meantime, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's also available on the Amazon Fire TV free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7. It covers the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available free on the Fire TV channels app.